Most people never noticed the cleaning crew at Hallberg International, not because they were mean, just busy. Heads down, coffee in hand, eyes on emails. The janitors moved like whispers in the background, pushing carts, wiping down glass, emptying trash cans under the cover of normalcy. That Monday morning in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, the lobby buzzed with the usual noise of commerce, heels clicking on tile, voices mumbling through Bluetooth earbuds, elevators dinging their arrival like background music. Jonathan Kellerman, the company's CEO, was halfway through his usual path from the garage to the 18th floor when something stopped him cold. It wasn't a fire alarm. It wasn't a protest. It was a voice, crisp, fluid, melodic, Mandarin. Not the clunky, hesitant syllables of a tourist, but a native flow that belonged more in a Beijing boardroom than a Texas office tower. Kellerman's ears tuned in like a soldier hearing his mother, a tongue in a foreign land. He turned instinctively. His mind ran through a quick mental list. Had the Shanghai team flown in early? Was one of the interpreters running a drill? But then his eyes landed on something he didn't expect. A man in a janitor's uniform, burgundy shirt, navy pants, short gray hair slicked back with the kind of precision that said military past or prideful habit, was speaking to an older Chinese gentleman near the touchscreen lobby directory. Calm, measured, pointing toward the elevators with a polite hand gesture. The older man looked relieved, like he'd just found an oasis after wandering lost. Kellerman narrowed his eyes. He knew that janitor. Not well. Just the occasional late-night nod in the hallway, a silent ghost passing through the marble corridors after board meetings, always respectful, never stood out, never lingered. But this wasn't background noise. This was fluency. He took a step closer. Before he could even process what was happening, the janitor turned toward a delivery guy, juggling a clipboard and 3 boxes. Without missing a beat, he spoke again, this time in Spanish. Fast, friendly, direct. The delivery man responded with a stunned, "Sí, gracias," as if caught off guard by the professionalism. Then came the third act. A vendor nearby, confused by mislabeled signage, asked for directions. The janitor replied in fluent French, gesturing toward the appropriate conference hall. Smooth, precise, not a flicker of hesitation. And just like that, something shifted in Kellerman's gut. Not from anger, not from suspicion. It was guilt, the quiet kind. The kind that creeps in when you realize you've walked past brilliance every day and never stopped to look. A man who mopped floors at night had just spoken 3 languages before 9 a.m., and nobody had noticed until now. Kellerman's mind snapped into focus. He had questions, and it was time, long past time, to ask them. "Excuse me." Kellerman's. A voice cut through the air with a polite firmness as he stepped forward. The janitor turned, surprised but composed. "Yes, sir," he replied. His tone was respectful, but not meek, more like someone used to being overlooked, now caught in the act of being undeniable. "That was Mandarin, right?" Kellerman asked. The man nodded. "Yes, sir." "You speak it fluently?" "Yes." "And Spanish? French?" "Yes, sir." The CEO studied him, unsure whether he was impressed or stunned. "You speak all 3? The janitor nodded again. "Also Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and I read Latin, but I don't really count that." Kellerman blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir." There was no hint of pride in the man's voice, no ego, just fact, delivered like clockwork, a statement of reality the world had been ignoring. "What's your name?" Kellerman asked finally. "Dwayne Johnson." The name struck him like a note out of place, familiar but unexpected in this context. "Mr. Johnson, are you free for a few minutes?" Dwayne tilted his head slightly. "Now?" "Yes, I'd like to talk to you in my office." There was a pause. Not fear exactly, more like the natural hesitation of someone unused to being noticed. Then came the nod. All right. Kellerman pressed the elevator button and held the door. Dwayne stepped in. Silence fell between them as the elevator began its quiet climb toward the executive suite. It was only after a few floors that Dwayne spoke. "I've worked here 13 years, he said softly. "Never thought I'd be invited up." Kellerman turned toward him, gave a small smile. "You might be surprised how quickly things can change." He meant it as reassurance, but he had no idea how true it would turn out to be. When the doors slid open, Dwayne stepped onto the polished wood floor with a careful step. The executive level smelled like citrus and money, leather chairs, subtle colognes, and the kind of carpet that muffled ambition. Kellerman's assistant looked up, startled by the unfamiliar uniform beside her boss. He didn't explain, just nodded for her to let them through. Inside the sleek, glass-walled office, Kellerman gestured toward a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." Dwayne lowered himself into the seat like someone entering a museum. Cautious, observant, unshaken. His eyes scanned the room. He wasn't impressed, just aware. The massive world map behind the CEO, the espresso tray, the photo of 2 smiling daughters, and a dusty industry award from Brussels. All details filed away. Kellerman leaned forward. "I'll be honest, I didn't expect to have this conversation today." Dwayne gave a small nod, posture straight. "But I just heard you speak 3 languages like flipping light switches, and I need to understand. How does someone like you end up here, cleaning floors?" For a second, Dwayne said nothing. His eyes shifted to the skyline outside the window, then back. "You got time for the truth?" Kellerman nodded. "Wouldn't have asked otherwise." Dwayne exhaled slowly, rubbing his palms together like warming up a story that had waited too long to be told. Born in Toledo, Ohio. Only child. Dad was a pipe fitter. Mom was a nurse's aide. We didn't have much but education. That was law in our house. I got a full ride to Kent State, majored in linguistics, was halfway through my master's when my mother got sick. Came home to take care of her. Dad passed 6 months later from a stroke. He paused. Things unraveled after that. Had a son, no money, partner didn't stick around. So I worked, grocery stores, temp jobs, loading docks. Then a supervisor here offered me night shifts. Let me pick my son up from school, paid the bills. That's how I got here. Kellerman didn't blink. He just listened. Dwayne added quietly, "But I didn't stop learning. I borrowed textbooks, read newspapers in 5 languages, practiced with anyone who'd talk to me. Language is the only thing that ever made me feel like I still mattered. There it was. Not a speech, not a performance, just truth. Simple, stark. And suddenly it was the most valuable thing Kellerman had heard all year. For a few seconds, Kellerman didn't say anything. He just sat there, facing the man who had been invisible in plain sight for over a decade. Dwayne Johnson, janitor, single father, self-taught polyglot, had just delivered a story that hit harder than any TED Talk or leadership seminar Kellerman had sat through. No polish, no pitch deck, just grit, just life. Dwayne shifted in his chair and added quietly, "Most people never ask. They see the uniform and assume." That word, assume, hung in the air like a verdict. Kellerman felt it tighten around his chest. He exhaled slowly, then leaned back in his chair. Dwayne didn't look angry. He didn't look resentful. He just looked real, like a man who'd stopped expecting applause and learned to carry his brilliance quietly, alone. "Look, Mr. Kellerman," Dwayne said, voice even, "I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel guilty. Life happened. I did what I had to do, still do, but you asked, and that's the truth." Kellerman nodded, his fingers absently tracing the edge of his notebook. This wasn't about charity. This wasn't a sob story. This was a wake-up call, delivered by a man whose talent had been buried under mop handles and supply carts. "You ever think about doing anything else?" Kellerman asked. Dwayne shrugged, his mouth forming the faintest smile. "Sometimes, but it's hard to dream when your rent's due." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, dense with all the things unsaid. Kellerman reached for his pen and began jotting something in his notebook. "What are you writing?" Dwayne asked, his voice calm but curious now. "Ideas," Kellerman replied. But what was swirling in his mind was bigger than just ideas. It was a shift. Something had cracked open inside him, something that wouldn't let this story fade into a nice anecdote. All day long, through budget, meetings and vendor calls, Kellerman couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. Dwayne's voice stayed with him, grounded, articulate, resilient. He kept replaying the moment Dwayne had listed those 9 languages like he was reading off a grocery list. No pride, no need to impress, just facts from a man who'd never been invited to speak. By late afternoon, the executive suite began to blur. Numbers on screens felt like noise. Kellerman stood up, left his corner office and rode the elevator all the way down, past the glass, the polish, the money, to the basement level. The service hallway was warmer, the walls scuffed from darts and heavy boots. He passed vending machines, locker rooms, the smell of bleach and effort. Then he saw him. Dwayne was in the janitorial supply room, restocking microfiber cloths. His posture was the same, calm, focused, quiet. "Mind if I bother you again?" Kellerman asked, stepping inside. Dwayne turned slightly, clearly surprised. "You came down here?" Kellerman smiled. "Couldn't stop thinking about our talk. Listen, I've got a favor to ask." Dwayne wiped his hands on his shirt. "What kind of favor?" "We've got a group from the São Paulo office upstairs. They came early, and our translator cancelled last minute. Can you help?" Dwayne hesitated for just a second. "Portuguese?" "Yes." He nodded. "I can do that." And just like that, Dwayne Johnson was about to step into a room he'd never cleaned, but would change forever. Not with a mop, but with words. The quiet kind that could move mountains. Minutes later, the temperature in conference room 4C shifted. 4 executives from the São Paulo office were seated, stiff and silent, checking their phones with half-hearted focus. They hadn't expected to be here early, hadn't expected their translator to cancel, and certainly hadn't expected their solution to walk in wearing a burgundy janitor's shirt. Dwayne Johnson entered quietly, gave a respectful nod, and, without preamble, began speaking in smooth, conversational Portuguese. It wasn't just fluent. It was confident, local, like someone who understood not just the words but the culture behind them. Within seconds, the air changed, shoulders relaxed, eyebrows raised. The tension in the room softened as the executives realized they weren't going to fumble through another awkward, half-translated pitch. One of the Brazilian visitors cracked a joke, a culturally specific line that would have flown past most non-native speakers. Dwayne didn't just get it, he answered with a punchline of his own. Laughter broke out, not polite laughter, real laughter. The kind you can't fake. Kellerman stood at the back of the room, watching the shift unfold. He didn't speak a word of Portuguese, but he understood what he was seeing. Dwayne wasn't just translating, he was connecting. He was making people feel heard, respected, seen, and it hit Kellerman all over again. This wasn't a favor, this was a resource his company had never tapped. When the meeting ended 20 minutes later, one of the Brazilian executives turned to Kellerman and said, in clear, deliberate English, "She's better than anyone we've worked with this year." Then, catching his own mistake, he added with a smile, "Sorry, he is." Kellerman returned the smile, eyes flicking toward Dwayne, who was already gathering empty coffee cups into a tray like it was just another shift. "Where'd you find him?" the executive asked. "Right here," Kellerman replied. And he meant it in every sense. Back in the hallway, Kellerman caught up with Dwayne. "You ever done professional translation before?" Dwayne shook his head. "Not really, just helped folks out in hospitals, government offices, stuff like that." "No certificate?" "Didn't have time for school. My son needed me more." And where is he now? He's 26, software engineer in Tempe, paid his way through school, stubborn, just like his old man. They both chuckled, and for a moment, the roles of CEO and janitor fell away. Just two fathers, two men from different paths, bound by something deeper than a job title. They returned to the basement, where Dwayne clocked back in. He had 2 more floors to clean before the shift ended, but just before they parted, he turned and said, "I didn't do anything special today." Kellerman looked at him, eyebrows raised. "That's not how it looked to me." Dwayne offered a faint smile and disappeared down the hallway, cart in hand. That night, Jonathan Kellerman sat in his car in the company lot longer than usual. He didn't turn on the radio, didn't check his phone. He just sat there thinking, not about quarterly reports or market share, but about Dwayne Johnson, about how long he'd been working in that building, about how many others might be like him, talent, discipline, brilliance, hiding in boiler rooms and mop closets. He thought about the hours they'd spent searching for new blood, recruiting overseas, investing in diversity initiatives, yet somehow overlooking the gold buried right in their own backyard. And as the parking lot lights flickered against the windshield, Kellerman realized something else. This wasn't about Dwayne anymore. It was about every single person who'd ever been underestimated. And he knew, without a doubt, that tomorrow needed to be different. The next morning, Dwayne Johnson's ID badge beeped at an unfamiliar hour. He had just finished wiping down the east lobby glass when his supervisor, Ron, tapped him on the shoulder. The look on Ron's face wasn't frustrated, but it wasn't casual either. "Hey, Dwayne," he said. "Mr. Kellerman asked to see you again." Dwayne blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" Ron shook his head. "Nope, he just told me to send you up." Dwayne dried his hands on a towel tucked into his belt and headed upstairs. But this time felt different. People noticed him now, not the curious glances of confusion, but the double takes that ripple through a workplace like a whisper. A receptionist smiled, eyes knowing. An IT guy nodded, not his usual indifferent nod, but something else, something that said, "We heard." The elevator seemed to rise slower this time. When he stepped out onto the executive floor, the air had a weight to it, a pressure. Kellerman stood at the window, coffee in hand, staring out at the skyline as if searching for a future just barely visible. "Come in," he said without turning. Dwayne stepped inside and waited silently. Kellerman finally turned around, placed his mug on a coaster with precise care and said, "I've been thinking." He didn't launch into corporate speak. No PowerPoint slides. Just a man speaking from his gut about how many people never get a shot. Not because they're not qualified, but because no one ever looks twice. Dwayne stood still, arms loosely at his sides. He knew where this was going. He just didn't know how far. "I want to create a position," Kellerman continued. "One that doesn't exist right now, but should have a long time ago. A cultural liaison for international affairs, someone who understands not just languages, but people, vendors, clients, visitors, someone who can bridge gaps without making people feel like they don't belong." Dwayne furrowed his brow. "For me," Kellerman nodded. "You're qualified, more than most people on my leadership team, if we're being honest, and you've already proved it, with professionalism, patience, and intelligence." Dwayne swallowed hard. "Is this real?" "As real as it gets." Dwayne hesitated. "I don't have a degree." "You have something better. Lived experience, discipline, fluency in 9 languages. I'm not hiring a diploma. I'm hiring you." Dwayne shifted his weight, still unsure. "Why me?" "Because I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before most people finish their coffee. Because I'm tired of overlooking people like you. People who do twice the work for half the credit." There was silence. Thick, stretched. Silence. "You know what people are going to say," Dwayne said finally. "I don't care," Kellerman answered. Dwayne's arms crossed slowly. He was still in that janitor's uniform, still wearing boots he'd walked hundreds of miles in. "I've never had a desk job," he said. "Never had a title." "You'll learn fast," Kellerman assured. "I don't even have the wardrobe for this kind of thing." Kellerman smiled. "HR is already preparing a clothing stipend." Dwayne let out a dry laugh, more exhale than amusement. "You thought of everything, huh?" "I'm trying." A pause hung between them, and then Dwayne asked the question that had been clawing at his gut. "What about my shift? Who replaces me?" Kellerman's smile softened. "We'll find someone to clean those floors, but no one can replace you." Dwayne looked down, then back up again, something flickering behind his eyes. "You sure this isn't just a gesture?" "This is overdue recognition." For a beat, Dwayne stood silent. Then he nodded, slow and steady. "All right then," he said, "let's see what I can do." He reached out his hand, and Kellerman shook it. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a new beginning, for both of them. By Wednesday morning, word had spread faster than the elevators could carry it. Dwayne Johnson, the night shift janitor, was now a newly appointed executive. The buzz didn't come from a press release or a company announcement. It leaked through whispers in hallways, side eyes in break rooms, and the low hum of Slack messages that felt more like gossip than communication. Nobody knew the full story. Not really, but they all had theories. She speaks 9 languages, one whispered near the vending machines, getting the pronoun wrong, but missing the point even harder. CEO himself pulled him upstairs. He must have had some kind of government clearance or secret background, another speculated, while stirring powdered creamer into their coffee. But not everyone was clapping. In the staff lounge, 2 marketing assistants huddled over salads and superiority. "I have a master's in international business," one murmured. "Been here 2 years, waiting on a promotion." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "He was scrubbing toilets last week." The first one scoffed. "It's performative. Kellerman's trying to look progressive." The resentment trickled upward too, seeping into strategy sessions, performance, reviews, even boardrooms. The elevation of someone who hadn't climbed the traditional ladder stirred something deep and uncomfortable. Because Dwayne hadn't just broken through, he'd skipped steps, not through shortcuts, but through truth, skill, and timing, and that kind of ascent didn't sit well with everyone. Dwayne felt it the moment he stepped into his new office on the 12th floor. It wasn't large or flashy, just a desk, a plant, and a monitor he hadn't even logged into yet. But to him, it might as well have been the moon. HR had finished, onboarding him that morning, and when they asked if he wanted to return the janitor uniform, he said no. He didn't want to wear it. He just needed to keep it. A reminder. That afternoon, he met with Victor, the head of international operations. Victor walked in with a clipboard and a glare that never softened. He didn't shake Dwayne's hand. He didn't sit. "So you're the new liaison," he said flatly, like the words tasted sour. Dwayne nodded. "That's what I'm told." Victor raised an eyebrow. "You have corporate experience." Dwayne looked him straight in the eye. "Only from the outside looking in." Victor didn't laugh. He just dropped a thick folder on the desk. Reports from Italy, contracts from Dubai, vendor mess in Sao Paulo. "Think you can handle it?" Dwayne stood up, his voice calm. "I'll need a few hours to review, but yes." Later that evening, Kellerman popped into the office. "How's day 1?" he asked. Dwayne leaned back in his chair. "I've had worse." Kellerman grinned. "Victor giving you a hard time?" "He doesn't scare me." "I figured." There was a pause. Then Dwayne asked something he hadn't dared to say earlier. "Why now? Why me? You could have thrown me a bonus and kept it moving." Kellerman leaned against the doorway. "Because I saw myself in you." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "You were a janitor." "No, but I was overlooked. Came from nothing. Dad fixed cars in a town no one visits." I worked 3 jobs through college. Most people thought I didn't belong in rooms like this. Dwayne nodded slowly. Now you're the one deciding who gets in. Exactly. Dwayne glanced down at the files on his desk. I'll be honest, he said. I'm nervous. Good, Kellerman replied. Means you care. Dwayne looked up again. People are gonna hate this. They'll get over it, Kellerman said. Or they won't. Either way, we're moving forward. The CEO turned to leave, but his words lingered. You have a story, Dwayne, a real one, and now you've got a platform. Dwayne sat there long after the door clicked shut. He thought about everything he'd given up, everything he'd endured, and everything that was still coming. This wasn't just a new job, this was a new fight. By the end of the week, Dwayne's nameplate was bolted onto the frosted glass outside his office. Brushed steel, clean letters, permanent, Dwayne Johnson, Cultural Liaison, International Affairs. The kind of title no one had ever linked to a janitor. The company email explaining his new role hit inboxes that Friday morning, short, crisp, composed by Kellerman himself. It didn't read like a feel-good story. It wasn't a PR stunt. It laid out facts, multilingual, veteran employee, proven results, now stepping into a vital new position. No pity, just precision. But that didn't silence the noise. Some managers grumbled in private threads. Others started to thaw after watching him in action. He wasn't flashy, he didn't perform. He just worked, with a quiet excellence that filled gaps years of policy had failed to address. When he walked into a room, people listened, not out of obligation, but because he spoke their language, literally. The following Monday, he was called to join a meeting with a delegation from Morocco. The company's North African expansion had been stalled for months. Mistrust, poor translations, misread customs. Dwayne walked into the room in a beige blazer, no tie, no fuss, and greeted the Moroccan executives in flawless Darija Arabic. It wasn't just about fluency, it was tone. It was posture, it was respect. Everyone in the room felt it. Even the Americans who couldn't understand a word could sense the shift. When you speak someone's language, you don't just unlock, meaning you unlock dignity. After the meeting, one of the Moroccan partners approached Dwayne, touched his chest gently, a traditional gesture of gratitude. "No one has ever done that for us," he said. "Not in our language, not like that." Dwayne nodded once. "You matter," he said. "That's all." By midweek, Kellerman made another move. Quiet but pointed. He had the company's main training room renamed. No announcement, no cake, just a new plaque on the door. The Johnson Room. The same room where new hires would be onboarded, where leaders would learn strategy, where culture would be taught. It was a message carved in metal. That greatness doesn't always wear a suit. That same afternoon, Kellerman stood outside the room, watching a fresh batch of interns file in. One leaned over and whispered, "Who's Johnson?" A senior staffer responded without looking up. "He's the one who reminded this company what talent really looks like." Back upstairs, Dwayne returned to his desk to find an envelope. No return address. Just his name, handwritten. Inside, a single note. "I used to think I'd be invisible, forever, but today I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." No signature, no sender, just proof that someone, somewhere was watching and needed this. Dwayne sat back in his chair, fingers tightening slightly around the paper. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. That note wasn't for show. It was a mirror, a reflection of every late shift, every missed opportunity, every time he'd been passed over and never asked why, because this wasn't just a job. It was a door. And now that it was open, he wasn't just walking through it. He was holding it wide, for everyone behind him still waiting to be seen. Not every door stays open without a fight. And it didn't take long for pushback to find its way to Dwayne's desk. Late Thursday he was summoned, not by Kellerman, but by someone higher. Eleanor Craig, senior board member, fortified reputation, sharper tongue. She'd been part of Hallberg International since the 90s, her authority carried like armor. Dwayne entered the conference room on the 17th floor with quiet confidence. Eleanor didn't look up at first, just tapped her pen. "Have a seat." He sat. "I've reviewed your file," she said flatly. "You have no degree, no formal corporate training, no certifications." "That's correct," Dwayne said. Calmly, Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You were cleaning floors here 3 weeks ago." "I was." "So, help me understand. How does someone like you end up handling international affairs at a Fortune 500 company?" Dwayne didn't flinch. "Because I speak the languages, I understand the cultures. I've already fixed vendor issues in Sao Paulo, cleared delays in Morocco, and helped secure new deals with Brazil. That's not instinct, that's work." Eleanor blinked just once. "You think that's enough?" "No," Dwayne replied. "But it's a start. I don't need to be liked. I need to be useful. And I am." Eleanor stood slowly, closed the file, then gave him a look. Not of approval, but acknowledgement. "You're a gamble." Dwayne nodded. "My entire life's been one." After the meeting, Dwayne didn't head straight back to his office. He crossed the street, sat on a bench, and looked up at the tower of glass he now worked inside. So many nights he'd pass that building with a mop in hand. So many days no one even looked up. Now they all saw him, and some didn't like what they saw. He pulled out his phone, called his son. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" "I'm good," Dwayne said. "Just wanted to hear your voice." They talked for a few minutes about nothing special. A new movie, a dog treat subscription, grocery sales. But it grounded him. When they hung up, Dwayne stood up, crossed the street again, and took the elevator back up. The next morning, word of the Eleanor Craig meeting was already floating through the building. And yet, Dwayne didn't flinch. He arrived early, spoke at a team meeting, took a call with the German office, steady, clear, sharp. The same hallway that once ignored him now posted a handwritten message on his door whiteboard. "We see you." Weeks passed. Something shifted. People stopped coming to him just for language help. They came for advice, perspective, permission to believe in themselves. He mentored interns, guided middle managers, helped team leads navigate foreign contracts. When one intern, a shy Vietnamese kid named Bao, asked how he learned 9 languages, Dwayne smiled. "One word at a time, same way you will." He wasn't just filling a role, he was shifting a culture. And one afternoon, over coffee with Kellerman, he said quietly, "There's probably more folks like me in this building." Kellerman nodded. "You want to help me find them?" Dwayne grinned. "Already started in my head." By month's end, a pilot program launched, internal talent training, language mentoring, career pathways, Dwayne's idea, his vision, and when he stood at a national summit and told a crowd, "I was never just a janitor. I was fluent, I was capable, I was ready," no one looked long enough to see it. The room fell silent, then rose to its feet. Because brilliance doesn't wear a uniform, it doesn't beg to be seen, it just waits for the right person to notice. And when that happens, you don't just walk through the door, you hold it open. Sometimes we don't. Need more policies? We need to start paying attention. Dwayne Johnson didn't just get a promotion, he cracked open a door that had been closed for far too long, for far too many. He reminded the world that intelligence has no uniform, that brilliance needs no permission, that greatness can walk past us every day, quietly, patiently, waiting to be seen. So, if this story moved you, if it made you see people differently, made you feel inspired, or even made you angry at how much talent we overlook, then don't let it stop here. Hit that like button if you believe in giving people a chance. Drop a comment below. Who's someone in your life who's been underestimated? And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story could be the one that changes everything. Maybe even yours. Let's stop assuming. Let's start seeing.